there's a few awake people, that's okay. I'm going to be doing this presentation in English. So I'm assuming there's mostly developers in the room and you're used to reading documentation and doing everything in English, so shouldn't be a problem, I guess. I hope not. Ik kan altijd overschakelen Nederlands als het echt moet. Als er vragen zijn, stick your hand up. Try and heckle me. Us. I'm Jochem. This is Ruben. We're from Hoppinger. And we're going to talk a little bit about automation, deployment automation. I'll do a little bit of, I'll give a little bit away up front and say I'm not a Drupalist myself. I'm very new to Drupal, so you probably during the presentation come across some things and go, why the hell did you do that? Probably because I didn't know any better. So if you have questions like that or queries or whatever, please do ask. I might hand over to Ruben, who's actually got a lot more inside knowledge about Drupal and the way we use it at Hoppinger. I've been mostly working on the actual automation tool, which falls a little bit outside of Drupal itself. It works as a kind of shell, so that up front. Yeah, I want to practice better web development. I want to improve on what we do. My goal is continuous integration, and I don't know if anything that says anything to any of you, but anybody who's looked into that knows it's a very noble goal. It's not easy to get there, and web development is not something that easily lends itself to, and the tools that we have generally don't either. This is the whole reason the product that we're going to talk about and what we've done came into being. If you're not a developer, the next slide might seem a little bit shocking. I'll clarify. Everything's relative. When I say things suck, it's a developer thing. You find something, it's annoying, you find it a waste of time, it takes up precious resources, or it's things that you do that basically you shouldn't have to think about. If you don't know it sucks, then you're never going to do anything about it. So the reason I say everything sucks when it comes to web development, which as far as I'm concerned is hard enough as it is, you've got to spot the things that are painful in your job before you can tackle making them a little better, making your life a little easier. And the thing that really we had a problem with was deploying our sites again and again, updates, and not spending a day moving things by hand and spending a day configuring a production site or reconfiguring it. What the hell is this guy's problem? Well, I don't want to develop on a live site. If you're smart, you don't do that, because that's a way to anger your clients. You don't want to develop and test on the same kind of site, because you probably have testers that want to work on a stable environment. You've got multiple developers working on different areas of the site or on different things, like working on the design. You don't want them working on the same installation, because you'll have shouting matches all day. Who broke this? Why is there a fatal error on my screen, etc., etc. I don't know if anybody's ever encountered this. I don't like it. My co-workers don't like it when I break their things. So, like I said, I don't want to spend a lot of time and stress and pain configuring a site once I've actually built it. And having to kind of tweak and fix it so that it's working as far as the client is concerned. And generally, if we've got a good working relationship with a client, we'll get work ongoing. So increments. How do I push these out into production without making my life miserable? I want to write code. Yes, people awake. No. Basically, it's the same theme. You know, I want to be able to, at the end of the day, say, here's a site, we've developed it, we've tested it, there you go, play with it, it's live. Sorry? Oh, talk to themselves. Yeah, I have multiple developers working on the same site, and I want them to work efficiently. I don't want them getting in each other's way. Multiple installations or a test environment, trying to set up a continuous integration environment. I'm going to roll it out without having to worry about it. Life's stressful enough. Really, I need automation. Do you? I think you do. Automated Drupal development, tricky. Well, I discovered it was tricky. Because nobody could give me an out-of-the-box solution. So it would have been nice if someone said, here, have this. Oh, it works. But there's a lot of bits and pieces out there. People are probably, I don't know if you've ever played around with trying to automate stuff, builds and stuff. You've probably found a lot of bits and pieces out there. I did. I couldn't find an integrated, simple solution that I could grasp myself. The other problem, and one of the problems that it's not out there, I think, is because Drupal, from a history, as far as I can tell, runs an interactive site building paradigm. You put an installation there, and you basically do everything via the UI, or at least that's the basics of it. You know, especially for the end user, including site-specific configuration. And this gets into the way, you know, everything's in a database, and this gets into the way of being able to deploy automatically. You know, there's no integrated way of saying, okay, I've got code, do this. It's got to go via the UI. Of course, there's Drush, which is a great tool, especially in development, downloading, enabling, disabling, trying out modules, clearing the cache, all that kind of stuff. But it only goes so far. It's not a complete solution. You're going to have to do a lot of work with it to integrate it into a complete pipeline. So we built something which we call voiture. So, if anyone's wondering, we call it Drupal Auto. And Auto in French is voiture. For the Belgian contingent, we like to joke around a bit. Our requirements, we wanted a single command installation so that a developer, say a front-ender who comes in and starts wanting to do some theming, can do basically a single command, given a bit of upfront configuration, and have a running site on his local development machine. In the same way, running updates, you know, getting an SVN update on a local machine or on a production scene, a single command to do that. So everything can be run again and again, and you don't have to think about it, assuming you've tested it. So all the tools integrated into the project, things like Drush, which is a really cool idea, but we had problems with Drush being in different versions on different servers, or at the last minute somebody needs, oh, install it on that server. And then you realise Drush is not installed there, and then Yum's not working properly or whatever, and you know, something doesn't work and you can't get Drush installed properly, or it is installed and it's the wrong version, it does something just a little bit different to what it was doing in your test environment, and then all of a sudden everything breaks and you've got egg on your face in production. So we put all the tools that we use for Voiture, including a copy of Drush, into Voiture itself, so that the version that you run in test is the same that you run in your production, guaranteed. Zero interactive configuration, the whole idea of being able to deploy automatically, requires you not to have to do anything after you've updated your site, in terms of, you know, going into the administration area and configuring or whatever, which is easier said than done. And yeah, the last thing, no hacks in core. Voiture sits next to a standard Drupal installation, which obviously, you know, within your site's all directory, you're going to add your own modules and your contribs and whatever. But the rest of the Drupal installation stays clean, so that when you want to update that in a development environment, you can do that without having to merge custom hacks or whatever, which I think we all agree, anyone who's ever thought about it, that's a bad road to go down. It causes pain. Limitations. Well, take a look. The reason these limitations are in place is that we could have abstracted a lot more out, and we intend to. Things like whether we can support Git or not, or other web servers. But we wanted to get a tool that actually gets something done for us, rather than getting a tool that does everything for everybody. And that means making concessions. You know, we have a limited time span, and we have a lot of pressure to get this thing working for us. So we did what we could to start off with. And you know, we don't know what the future might hold, but one of our top priorities is to abstract the version controlling out so that Git can be supported natively as well. I'll just highlight the click and go not supported. For developers who are used to only clicking together views or whatever, we make your life miserable, because you might define a view interactively in your development environment, but that's where the fun begins, that's not where the development ends. It needs to go into code in some way, generally via features, which we try and leverage as much as possible with Vertuo. But like I said, it's not a case of click to click and there you go, there's your view, it's working. It kind of speaks for itself, but I thought it was worth saying. Some of the capabilities. Initialize structural data, which is one of the, I think, the biggest problems and one of the driving forces in actually doing something ourselves, rather than trying to take tools that are already out on the web. Our clients expect that new websites come pre-delivered with certain basic content. A number of admin users for the customer to use, a number of nodes. You know, things like an about us or a content for the home page or whatever. If you just put the Drupal near with all your modules and whatever, you don't have that. So you've got an empty site. The customer doesn't know where to go with this. And there's two ways of tackling it. Either you do it by hand, or you figure out a way to kind of automate it so that every installation that you run will have a minimum set of basic what we term structural data, so that you've got something in your site so that you can actually, you know, you can visualize it. Menu links is another one, which, you know, not having any menu items in your site, yeah, it's functional, it's got everything it needs, but there's nothing to click. And the end user is just going to have like a big question mark over their head and go, what the fuck? Yeah, all the site configuration has to go in code, basically. We believe the way to go, especially when it comes to, it comes down to putting everything in version control. So your configurations, right down to your vhost configurations for your actual server, they go in code in your repository. Any changes you make are then logged, rather than going in and, you know, SSHing into a server and, oh, I'll just change this path, I'll fix this log directory or whatever. Because make a mistake in something like a path, okay, that's easy enough to fix. Make a mistake in a regular expression in mod rewrites, that might be a bit more problematic. Put it in SVN, you can test it, and you can roll it out when you've tested it. Change that functionality. There are some things that you can't easily do with standard Vertuo functionality. There are some things that you really have to get dirty, get your hands dirty with the innards of Drupal to get certain configuration they're in, or tweak data or content that's already up and running in a site. And the change set functionality allows you actually to kind of have a set of update scripts which are run once if they're not already being run on that particular installation. And allows you basically to do anything you want in that PHP script that's being run without limitation, including rm minus rf and boom. I don't recommend that, but that gives you the kind of idea of how much freedom you have there. And the bootstrapping of Drupal itself, make it extensible so that you can do some kind of custom stuff, whatever that might be, at bootstrap time with the request without touching the core Drupal functionality. One of the reasons we kind of built that in was we used the domains module, which I don't know if anybody's used. And we had a little bit of a problem integrating it nicely. And we basically had to play with the bootstrap process in order to get domains to behave in the context that we were using it. And the bootstrap wrapper, the extensible part of it, allowed us to do that. What does a Drupal project kind of look like in the basis? This is in two halves. Someone's rearranged the slides a little bit. Okay. There's a conf directory, which is basically for all your installations that you run. So for every developer, in every target installation like staging and production or whatever, there's a different config target directory inside the CNF directory, which can get a bit unwieldy. It's not perfect, and it is really aimed at smaller teams. So if you've got 100 Drupal developers, we'll probably have to figure something new out for you guys. But again, it's a case of kind of, it works, and it could probably be refactored and done better, but there you have it. These are the top level, by the way, 1, 2, 3. They're top level directories in the project as it exists in the SVN repository. Your data directory is it's always there, and it includes at least a directory called structural fixtures. We'll come to a little bit later, and that contains PHP files which actually define this structural data that is automatically added to the site if it doesn't already exist. The include directory is kind of like a place to dump real custom stuff that you might use for command line scripts and God knows what. It's kind of superfluous, but we often put it in because we have little bits and pieces we throw in there. Okay, the second part of the layout is HTTP docs, and that's basically where you unpack a standard Drupal installation. And that's where you do the most of your work within the site's all directory structure. And the only real tweak that we do is in settings.php, which you normally edit by hand anyway. And what we do is, I'll show that slide a little bit later, we add 2 lines at the top, whereby we basically redirect to a settings.php, which comes with Vartur, which dynamically sets the basic Drupal variables, rather than having to manually edit it for every installation, which obviously goes against the whole idea of trying to automate. And then a directory Vartur, which is, if you care to have a go at it at some point, it's now downloadable. I'll show you the address at the end of the talk. That's where the table for Vartur hangs out. We actually use an SVN externals link to create the Vartur directory, so we link to a tagged version. It avoids having too many copies lying around. And all the Vartur stuff that does its kind of magic, if you like. Use a bit of magic. Mostly because I don't understand half of it myself anymore. It's a lot of people working on it. But it all lives in there, so it's not, apart from the link in settings.php and a bit of configuration in your vhost for Apache, there's nothing actually put into the standard Drupal installations. Try and keep it as clean as possible. Again, it's got a conf directory, which has got some reusable configuration files which can be linked to or included in your installation configuration files. The bin directory is actually where all your command line tools hang out, things that you will use, including like, if you do Vartur /bin/drush, and that's your integrated drush command. It already knows when you run it about the site that it's in, or the project, so you don't have to worry about it anymore, and the install and update commands and various other things. The DFC, what we call the custom Drupal front controllers. The PHP files you normally find in the root directory of your Drupal installation, we actually have copies of those with some customized code in them. Rather than trying to put the customized code into the Drupal core. But we couldn't really work around this, so what we do is we allow at request time, we actually redirect any calls to, say, the index.php to the custom DFC file of the same name. Carry on. Drupal variables. This one's like kind of painful. It's the whole idea of everything's in the database, which works great if you've got one site and you're working on it on your own and it's just there as the end user. You define everything, via an interface. That works great. If you've got multiple installations and you want them all consistent or whatever, how do you get all these variables and these kind of site configuration things which aren't installation specific? How do you get them all consistent and keep them that way? Well, what we do is we define them in code. So we take the stuff that's in the variables table that we want to really, have consistent across all our installations, and we unserialize it from what it's stored in the database, and we stick it in PHP files, which are automatically loaded in when you do an install or an update with Fortuna, and it overrides anything that might be in the database. It's a really simple kind of, maybe a bit hackish technique, but it works. And it's simple to understand. Personally, I also find it a lot quicker and easier to change these configuration files when I can open my editor and just, hack a PHP object or an array or whatever, or just a simple string, rather than having to figure out, in which screen, where is that again, because there's so many of them. And that's probably partially down to me because I'm not that well versed in where everything is, but the other point of it is if changes are made, it's in the repo. And if someone kind of makes a mistake, you know who to talk to. You know what the mistake was. You know when it happened, or at least you can look it up. If it happened in the database, you don't know what the setting was that was correct, or the one that was working beforehand. And you kind of, you have to guess. The other way we handle variables, because it's not the only way, this is for the most core basic variables, is using strong arm and features. We do leverage that as well. So, and we kind of have an internal discussion going over, so some people think strong arm's the way to go, some people think it's just simple PHP files is the way to go. Well, you can guess which side I'm on, but that's an ongoing discussion. And I think it depends on the project and it depends on the people who are working with it. I don't think it's something you can set in stone. Do what works for you is one of the mantras we try and maintain. The installation targets, which is basically the definition of your machine, the installation of that project on your machine or any given machine. It contains an app ini file, which is kind of like your ultra core configuration, generally your database configuration, your site admin email address and password, that kind of stuff. Maybe some other bits and pieces. There's a shared version. I'm up to that next, so I'll talk to you in a minute. It also contains your vhost for your particular host. We have a little script as well which can generate a vhost file. But again, there are variations between different machines. And generally, when you make a vhost configuration for Apache, it doesn't like relative paths, which is a real pain. Because if it did, we could use just one vhost for every installation. But that just doesn't work in Apache. So the specific vhost configuration for a site, it lives in your installation target directory. There's also a shared target, which contains an app ini again, which contains kind of things which are shared all across. So try and minimize the amount of configuration you do per target. They kind of stack up. So you have a shared which goes across all installations, and your specific installation stuff kind of is merged on top of that automatically. The shared target also contains a module list, which again is confined into a simple PHP array in just a PHP file, which defines a list of the modules that are active for this site. It assumes that the modules are actually, they exist, you know, in the relative contrib or custom directory or features directory. But it defines a list, and anything not in that list will not be enabled. If it is enabled, it will be disabled. This is to provide consistency, so that it's not possible on a production environment for someone to go, oh, I'll just stick this module in there, and then all of a sudden it blows up and nobody knows why. You run an update again on that site, and it will just kind of get rid of this module for you. And it means that everyone's working with the same list. So it's really simple. It may not be, there's probably a better way of doing it, but it works. And at this stage, you know, it's the best we've got. So yeah, other fun stuff too. Things like the vars. There's some stuff for the extenders, defining a map of extenders for the bootstrapping. When I say a map of extenders, I mean a set. It's just a file which says, here, load these classes in, and they represent extensions to the bootstrapping phase of a request, which should automatically run. SFI, structural feature items. And this is one of the main things that we couldn't figure out how to do with any of the existing tools that are out there at the moment. Bits and pieces that a site needs to actually function for an end user. You know, basic nodes, a contact page content, a home page content, stuff like that, which basically every site has. At least pretty much every site where we build. I don't know about you. Menu links, again, you know, your main menu, it's always got to be there in some way or form. Are we doing all right for time? All right. Basic taxonomy. A site quite often uses some forms of taxonomy to kind of make functionality appear. And it has to be there in order for you to see this functionality. And the last two, domains and users, the domains is specifically the domains module. So, you know, if you're using the domains module, you need a set of domains to be able to kind of use this functionality. Again, it needs to be there in order for the site to function. So when you install or update it, boom, it's there. You don't have to stick them in by hand. Again, for users of the admin accounts, if you want to do something fancy with the admin accounts. Yeah, it's basically a way of defining this stuff in code so that it gets put in if it's not in there, and it kind of just exists as a node or a menu link or whatever. And if it is there, it ignores whatever you've defined and keeps the content without overriding it. We try to leverage features. If you can't put it in a module, try and stick it in a feature, please. You know, use what you've got as far as you can. One of the things that we did find out the hard way is that it doesn't work very well if you create interdependencies between features themselves. This has a tendency of making the dependency list kind of go haywire. And things get back to front, and then you get Drupal telling you that features are not up to date or whatever, or need to be reverted, and it's a lot of fun. So our aim is always, when we stick things in features, to try and make them self-contained as much as possible. The developer tools, which is kind of like, you know, for working with the site, doing the deployment, but also, you know, when you're developing the site, you know, you're testing, you're actually redeploying every time to your own system. We have a number of tools that, like I said, are integrated into the what/build. The most important one is install and update commands, which, yeah, they hopefully do what they say on the tin, assuming you've got some kind of valid configuration for your installation. Translation tools, so that if you do translations locally, you can actually pump these into files which you can put into your version control and have them automatically appear in other installations when you run update there. Simple things for dumping and loading SQL, because you're going to be doing that at some stage to test stuff out and play with it. Backing up and copying the database. Again, you will be doing this kind of stuff during development, so try to make little tools that just make that a little less painful for, especially on junior developers, so they don't have to know all the MySQL dump parameters out of their head every time. It's kind of simplify the work. Like I said, I talked about it earlier, integrating Drush because of the problems with different versions or whatever, and also having to be in the right directory, otherwise Drush doesn't understand what you're doing. The Drush wrapper that we have in our bin directory, it always works on that project, regardless of where you are. And you don't have to tell it which site or whatever, it just knows, oh, it's your installation. It knows what target you're at. Simple wrappers for SVN, because especially people who never use SVN, like people who come fresh from school or whatever, it can be a little bit difficult, so we've got some simple commands to help them kind of get to grips with it without, again, knowing all the parameters or whatever and all the stuff that you get used to as you work along, but might be difficult to begin with. Variable dumping and listing, because we're taking stuff from the database that we defining while we're developing locally. We need to get it into code. So figuring out what's in the database and having a look at it, we've got a couple of commands just to make that a little bit easier, so that you have to go to the MySQL command line prompt and actually list what's in the table, or go to PHP MyAdmin and figure out where exactly you need to be. And we have a wrapper for PHP and a debug version and a profile version of PHP, which is specific to Zen Debugger, which just, again, just makes life a little bit simpler and more consistent when working with a project. Well, here's basically what it does when you either do an update or also an install, which is kind of a variation of update. It's updating from scratch. I don't know if you want me to go through this list one by one. You just kind of like take this in. These are basically all the steps that you would normally do by hand if you were taking a Drupal from a development environment to a production environment or any other kind of environment. With some specific two things in there, like loading the SFIs, getting the structured data in and whatever. Are there any questions about this? You want to go into any detail about this list? Or is it kind of logical? No? Is it illogical? Isn't anyone away? No. I've got 10 minutes left. But yeah, this basically defines what happens. One thing I might say about this before we move on is putting the site online if no errors. At the beginning of the process, we put the site offline by sticking a little file in the user data directory, which lets our bootstrapper know, oh, the site's offline. We work around the DB maintenance mode so that the database is never touched. Our bootstrapper kind of goes, oh, that file's there, right, I'll just show you the offline.html file. I won't even bother initializing Drupal, because we found that sometimes when we do things very wrong and our updates go explode in our faces, we get problems that the bootstrap phase is broken to the extent that we can't connect to the database. And in order to actually successfully show the Drupal offline page, you need the database, which is a kind of chicken and egg problem, which we worked around by doing something very simple. This is what, yeah, hi.
If there are errors, do you have the possibility to do a rollback?
Yes, but it's not that. It's not guaranteed to work. Rollback is really hard. I don't know if anybody's ever, tried figuring out how to do that. But yeah, you can always switch back to an older version and run the update against an older version. And if you're a bit lucky, then it works again. And if you're very unlucky, then you're going to get your hands dirty and you're going to have people shouting at you. We are working on creating more, being downgrading as well, and making it more capable of doing rollbacks securely. But it's really hard. So basically, our mantra is test your updates. If it's something extreme that you're adding a whole load of functionality, modules and content and God knows what, and configuration, take your live environment, stick it on a test environment, and then run the update again. It doesn't work? Do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again until it does work, until you feel really sure that when you run that update in production, it's going to work. That means actually it's probably more work. This is not about making your life easier and just, oh, I don't have to think about this. The aim of the goal is when you get to a production environment and you want to roll this out to the customer, that you have almost zero downtime. It maybe 30 seconds, a minute or whatever of the site's offline while it's just doing its thing, and then it's up and running again. And the idea is that you can test that process and really repeat it until you feel sure about that. Or you can wing it and just go, oh, bam, I'll update and hope for the best. On really small sites when the pressure's high, I admit, I've done that. And generally it works. If it's a small change, you're just updating a bit of PHP code in a module or whatever. But of course, it's not best practice. So I encourage people to actually test the whole update procedure against an exact copy of a live environment. This is our index file, which kind of takes over from the Drupal file. It loads in an include file, which basically does all the bootstrapping stuff. It does some extra stuff, and it does the standard Drupal bootstrapping phases in the way that you would expect, but it kind of wraps that. And then when it's done, it does the standard Drupal thing, and it says Drupal go by menu execute active handler. And
So what happened to the don't have core you mentioned earlier?
This index file that exists outside of the core Drupal installation. We don't use the index file in Drupal. We use our own, and it's delivered with Watu. It's the best we could do with the resources we had available. I agree it's not perfect, but we don't have a way of hooking into the whole process otherwise. You don't have to use this file, essentially. You can just say, well, we won't use the hook in your Apache configuration to override that file, and then it will just use your standard index PHP. And all things being equal, that'll probably work. Although you don't get the custom bootstrapping stuff. So, yeah. Hi.
What will happen if a module calls the standard Drupal bootstrap function? Will that work?
Sure. Sure.
Because you're doing your own bootstraps.
It's a wrapper around Drupal bootstrap. So it does the same phases in the same order in the same way, only it's got a little bit where it can extend before and after, without actually affecting the processing loop. So we didn't rewrite all that bootstrapping code. We just used the standard Drupal functionality to do that. Again, the update.php, if you're in staging or production, you can't run it. The reason behind it is we can't guarantee a consistent environment if you can just update a production environment interactively, because it's never going to match what you've got in your repository anymore, and it's not being tested. So, yeah, 5 minutes. And I'm going to kind of hand over to Ruben now. Hopefully we're going to have a small little demo. Okay, Ruben.
So I've got the demo project here called TPS. As you can see, it's installed, it's placed on my local machine. It's not working yet since it's not installed. This is currently the project directory. can run the install from here. It will ask me which target I'm using, like Jochen told you earlier. The configurations on each machine might be slightly different. First one. All the command line scripts. So it's installing the application now. It starts with this default Drupal install, which in Drupal 7 can be simulated through the command line instead of going to the browser. For the Drupal 6 version, we created our own Drupal command line install function, which basically fakes the whole process.
My machine is kind of slow. It's kind of dying slowly. It's an end of life. That said, the installation, the update process isn't that fast. I'm working on trying to make it a little bit faster, but our main problem is cache clearance, and having to do that quite a few times to actually get everything to work properly. And it doesn't work in your favor. And we live with it because even though it takes a little while, it's automated and rerun it and rerun it. You can go and do other things. You don't have to think about hitting the buttons anymore or whatever, and doing things in a certain order. So it's not perfect, but
yeah, especially for this project, it's still running on an old version for Voiture, since we tagged the versions when we released the project to avoid Voiture changing and the project crashing because it doesn't behave like it used to. So I've run a first install on the first tag I created for this project, which was a really basic development version. I had some spare time on my weekend and started building. So this contains a basic news page, homepage, which is working. The next step is loading things like the theme and such. I'm gonna log in for a second just to demonstrate the purpose, which is of course updating all environments that which are being maintained by a client. So I'm gonna edit the homepage a little bit. You can see there's no editor yet, so should be in the next version. Cancel the scroll bar.
2 fingers. He's not a Mac. After that, I made him do a live demo in front of a big crowd of people.
So I'm going to run the update command to the next version, which is update. Telling it to run in interactive mode so that I can specify. Some people don't know how a Mac works. So it asks me, I'll scroll up a little bit, head, front, tag or a branch, so you can just specify what we defined in SVM. We're going to upgrade to the first decent version. Like Jochen already told, it's only Unix based, so Mac, people who work on a Mac, people who work on Ubuntu can just use their normal machine. For people who are using Unix based web servers but are developing on Windows machines, we personally use VirtualBox to create a virtual machine which you can use for developing. It matches the production servers fairly well, and you can use Voiture, so we don't have to actually bother trying to make everything work on Windows machines. All the debug output you can see over here is just basically what Drupal set message would output if you do all these things by hand. To illustrate what happens. Okay, so the web page now with the theme, a lot of pages added, which should all be lorem ipsum mostly, since that's still for the client to fill. The change on the home page, 3 dots which are added here, are still in place, of course, since that's the most important part. Also, things like web forms can be added through the change set functionality. So scroll down a little bit. There's a web form on this node. The node is created through structural fixtures, so that's essential for the project. And then the change set adds the web form, which is a really custom module, and the only way to go through that is actually running the database queries and inserting the records which web form expects.
Which is quite painful, but luckily you only have to write that code once. As long as it's tested, then you can kind of forget about it. It looks kind of ugly, but it works. So.
Yes, another thing which Jochen didn't mention yet is, like you can see, this website should be Dutch. The labels aren't translated yet. The next version should be containing the translations for those few labels, for which we created a very small versioning system too, so that you can let a tester or your client enter the translations on a production or staging environment, and then get them back into version control so that they can be deployed to other environments, and so that your testers won't be asking you why the translation still isn't fixed. There's while we're waiting, we've created a website for Voiture, voiture.hoppinger.com. It contains the tarbals of the current Voiture releases, which we've placed online, and some documentation, including a small screencast of this demo, without me being a bit tensed and with having a little bit more time. Also some documentation on some detailed documentation, and here on the basics, a step-by-step guide to getting something to play with and with Voiture in Drupal 7. The update for the next version is ready, so we can check that one out. The label should be translated now. Yeah. Another thing, if I log in again, there should be an editor in place now, for example. Which is another thing which is really hard to really load in. Might be, I don't know why, but on the previous 18 times I tested this, there wasn't an editor in place. Again, through a change set, since all the settings for the editor are really rather complex. You know, they're just stored in a variable. We created a change set for that. The change sets really allow you to do anything which you feel like you can really define in features or code. So.
Yeah,
well, that should be it.
I think so. I'd just like to say thank you and for sitting through this rather vague presentation about Drupal automation. We hope mostly it's kind of inspired the developers among you to have a think about what you can do to, you know, make your development processes more robust and stop doing a lot of the tasks that are less fun, so you can concentrate on the cool stuff. The code for Voiture is downloadable. If you want to have a look at it, tell us it's rubbish or whatever. You know, yeah, grab it if you like. Maybe it's got some stuff in there you want to rip and use in your own way or whatever. Please feel free. Let us know what you think if you do. We're very interested to know what other Drupalers think of it and whether they can get anything out of it. So, thank you very much.